You know that feeling. You look around, maybe see some headlines, hear chatter, and you just sense there's a lot going on in your local school district.
Hmm.
But trying to cut through all that noise, figuring out what the real changes are and like how they actually affect the people working there, it can feel, well, overwhelming.
It absolutely can. Public education is complex. You've got state laws, local budgets, the day-to-day stuff. Getting a clear picture means really digging into the sources.
And that is exactly what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into the Socorro Independent School District, SISD.
Hmm.
We've been seeing sources suggesting some pretty positive moves, especially around how a big new state law is set to directly boost pay for teachers and staff.
Yeah, for this deep dive, we've got a few key things. There's official guidance from the Texas Education Agency, the TEA, explaining this new law.
Right.
We've got some local news reporting that gives context on the funding side. And really fascinating, a look inside a recent SISD Board of Trustees meeting where they hashed out their plans.
So think of this as like your shortcut to understand the landscape right now, our mission. Unpack these sources, show you how the state law is changing things, how SISD is stepping up, and highlight some other good things happening. We want to give you a really clear, informed picture.
Okay, let's set the scene first at the state level, because a lot of what's happening locally in SISD, it's really being driven by this new law, House Bill 2.
HB 2. Yeah, our TEA source mentions this didn't just, pop up randomly. It actually came out of recommendations from the Teacher Vacancy Task Force.
Right, the one Governor Abbott set up back in 2022. They were tackling recruitment, retention challenges across Texas.
And their number one recommendation was basically pay people more, increase overall compensation, support strategic pay.
Exactly. And HB 2, signed into law June 4th, 2025, that's the legislative action behind it. The news source noted it was headed to the governor a bit earlier, but TEA confirms June 4th was the signing date.
Okay, so this law is directly aimed at keeping teachers and staff through better pay. How does it actually, get the money to the districts?
Well, HB 2 creates two brand new, very specific funding streams for retention. There's the Teacher Retention Allotment, TRA, they call it,
TRA, got it.
and the Support Staff Retention Allotment, or SSRA. It also expands the existing Teacher Incentive Allotment, the TIA, but TRA and SSRA are the big new pieces with strings attached on spending, mandated spending.
And we're talking serious money statewide here, according to that news report.
Oh, absolutely. That report mentioned HB 2 brings a total of $8.5 billion for Texas public schools, and about $4 billion of that is specifically targeted for boosting educator pay.
Wow.
Plus, there's talk of a potential bump to the basic allotment. That's the core funding per student, maybe another $55 per student.
Okay, let's zoom in then on the Teacher Retention Allotment, the TRA. How does that money get figured out for a district like SISD?
So the TAA source, it explains the formula is really targeted. TRA funding is calculated based only on the number of classroom teachers a district has and their years of experience. It's not tied to student attendance numbers at all.
Interesting. So it's about the workforce itself.
Precisely. And for large districts like SISD, they have over 48,000 students, so they definitely qualify. The state sets specific dollar amounts per eligible teacher.
And what are those amounts for the big districts?
For districts with over 5,000 students, like Socorro, the rates are $2,500 for each classroom teacher with 3 to just under 5 years of credible experience.
Okay, 3 to 5 years.
And it jumps to $5,000 for each classroom teacher with 5 or more years of experience.
$5,000. So the state is putting money directly behind keeping those mid-career and veteran teachers. Who exactly counts as a classroom teacher for this TRA funding?
TEA has a pretty clear definition. It's someone employed by the district, teaching usually 4 more hours a day in an academic or a career and tech setting. Their job would typically need SBE certification, State Board for Educator certification, though, interestingly, the funding covers people in those roles, even if they're not currently certified, but, meet the job requirements. It also includes teachers hired through certain contracts if they fit that teaching role profile.
So it's really about the job function teaching students more than the specific contract type or even certification status, as long as they're doing the work.
Exactly. But it specifically does not include teachers' aides or full-time administrators. A teacher's eligibility for the $2,500 or the $5,000 is based on their total years of creditable experience, the info the district reports to the state.
Okay, now here's the crucial part, right? The state isn't just handing over this cash. They're saying how it has to be used for these specific teachers.
That is the absolute key point from the TEA source. Districts must use this TRA money to increase the salaries of the very teachers who generated the funds. It's designed as a required pass-through. It has to become part of their base salary.
So it's not a one-time bonus, it has to be built into their regular pay.
Precisely. Which means districts like SISD, they have to update their actual salary schedules for the 2025-26 school year to show these mandated raises based on experience.
Okay.
Now, the TEA does clarify one thing. The TRA funding itself can't be used for the district's extra costs that come with raises like higher TRS contributions or payroll taxes.
The ripple effect.
Right. But HB2 provided other funding increases, like that potential basic allotment bump we mentioned, specifically intended to help districts cover those associated costs for all the mandated raises, both TRA and SSRA.
That makes sense. Mandate the raise, but also provide some help for the related costs. Okay, let's shift to the other pot of money, the support staff retention allotment, SSRA. How's that one work?
SSRA works differently. According to TEA, this allotment is calculated at $45 for each student in adjusted average daily attendance. So this funding is tied to student numbers.
$45 per student. And what's the rule for spending this money?
Similar mandate. This allotment must be spent on increasing salaries for non-administrative staff. And that includes boosting base salaries, or for hourly folks, their base hourly wages. Again, it has to be part of their regular base pay.
Okay, non-administrative staff. Who falls into that category? Sounds like it could be a lot of people.
It really is. The TEA list is pretty extensive. It includes teachers who didn't qualify for TRA, meaning those with less than 3 years experience. So early career teachers get help here.
Okay, good.
It also covers school counselors, librarians, school nurses, teachers' assistants, custodians, food service staff, bus drivers, administrative assistants, basically a whole range of other support roles.
Wow, yeah, that covers so many essential people who keep schools running every day.
It really does. The list of who's not eligible is much shorter, mostly top leadership, superintendent, CEO, assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals, and anyone in a central supervisory job. And just like TRA, the SSRA funding itself can't pay for the extra payroll costs, but again, other HB2 funds are there to help districts manage those increased benefit contributions and taxes.
So, big picture. HB2 means mandatory base pay hikes for experienced teachers through TRA, and then for a really wide group of other essential staff through SSRA. Okay, now let's connect this state stuff to what's actually happening down in SISD. You mentioned that June 9th board meeting transcript. How's SISD taking this and running with it? What's their plan?
Right, that board meeting discussion really showed SISD is working to get their 2025-26 compensation plan fully aligned with HB2. The administration even mentioned they had to sort of restructure their pay scales, like splitting the current teacher-nurse librarian scale, specifically because HB2 treats TRA-eligible teachers differently.
And they talked actual dollar amounts for the proposed increases, didn't they?
Yes, they did. The proposal puts about $12.2 million specifically towards classroom teachers to meet that HB2 TRA requirement.
$12.2 million just for TRA teachers.
Then for other staff eligible under SSRA, that includes non-classroom teachers, nurses, librarians who fall into that group, the proposal is a 1.5% increase off the market midpoint for those jobs. That's estimated around $398,000.
Okay.
School counselors are also proposed for a 1.5% bump, about $26,000, again under SSRA rules. And the board discussion made it clear other support staff paraprofessionals, auxiliary folks like custodians and bus drivers, non-exempt admin and tech staff, they're all covered by the HB2 required increase using those SSRA funds.
This really shows HB2 translating into, well, potentially significant base pay increases right there in SISD employee paychecks, assuming this proposal goes through. What do they say this does for SISD in terms of, like, competing for staff?
Yes.
Especially teachers.
Yeah, the administration presented some data on that. They pointed out SISD already has one of the highest starting teacher salaries compared to nearby districts, right up there with East ISD.
Okay, strong starting point.
But here's the kicker. When you add in these mandated HB2 increases, particularly the TRA for experienced teachers, SISD's proposed annual salaries shoot up. Their data showed SISD would potentially have the highest salaries among neighboring districts at the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, and 20-year experience marks.
Oh, so this state funding directly helps make SISD potentially the top pair for experienced teachers in their area.
Yeah.
That's huge for retention.
Huge impact, yeah. But, the board meeting also gave us that human element, the employee feedback. It reminds us that while HB2 is tackling broad compensation, there are still very specific local needs and concerns being voiced.
Right. Tell us about that.
Well, we heard from Anthony Delgado. He's a teacher in a Special Education Behavior Improvement Center unit, a BIC unit. He spoke very passionately about needing a higher stipend for those incredibly tough jobs.
Got
He said their current $2,000 stipend hasn't gone up in over 10 years. Despite the difficulty, the emotional drain, sometimes even the physical risk involved working with students with severe behavioral challenges across different grades. And he pointed out neighboring districts pay way more, like $3,000 to $4,000 typically, some even higher.
That's a big gap.
Yeah, and we also heard from Rosie Pettis. She advocated for raises for all employees, maybe beyond just what HB2 mandates. She highlighted the rising cost of everything, especially the big jumps in insurance premiums that are forcing tough choices, like maybe skipping therapy or needed medication. She really emphasized recognizing loyalty and service.
Those comments really ground the discussion, don't they? So how did the district's proposal address these kinds of specific points? Alongside the HB2 stuff, did they talk about stipends?
They did, and it seems like they were listening. The proposed plan includes increasing that special education BIC unit teacher stipend from $2,000 up to $3,000.
Okay, a $1,000 increase.
Yes. Right. The administration specifically acknowledged how challenging those classes are and how hard it is to fill those jobs statewide. They also mentioned they plan to look at it again, possibly for another increase next year, depending on some anticipated extra special ed funds.
So a direct response, moving towards being more competitive, even if it doesn't quite match the highest neighbors just yet. What else on stipends?
They're also proposing some other strategic shifts. They want to refocus their recruitment stipend. Instead of trying to lure teachers from way outside El Paso, they want to target school psychologists offering a $5,000 stipend for 1 year for new hires in that critical shortage area.
Makes sense. Target the need.
And then there's a brand new proposed stipend, $2,500 for elementary core teachers who have 25 or more students in their class. That recognizes the extra workload with bigger class sizes.
$2,500 for larger elementary classes. How many teachers would that affect?
About 76 teachers, they estimated, costing around $190,000. And the board discussion on that was interesting. A board member called it kind of a creative solution, maybe offering flexibility and even cost savings compared to hiring more teachers, though it might require class size waivers.
Right.
But that same board member also urged the administration, hey, let's think about similar support for those really high-needs special ed units, echoing Mr. Delgado's point, because those units won't hit that 25 student mark.
That back and forth really shows the complexity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Balancing state mandates, local needs, budget reality.
Exactly. It shows how SISD is trying to weave it all to follow the state law, but also respond to specific challenges their own employees are highlighting.
Okay, so beyond compensation, which is obviously huge right now with HB2, what other positive things did the sources show happening in SISD?
Well, sticking with staff support, the board meeting had a concrete action on teacher retention. They actually approved contracts for 4 teachers who had previously been facing non-renewal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, these teachers had requested hearings, and ultimately the district decided to withdraw the non-renewal proposals and keep them on board. That's a direct move to retain experienced staff.
That's definitely a positive signal. We also saw some discussion about the employee health clinic, right? Another area focused on staff well-being.
Yes, there was an update about a transition for the clinic. They're planning to move from the current on-site model to potentially a near-site one, partnering with UMC, the University Medical Center.
Okay, partnering up.
Now, the context mentions some past challenges with, like, return on investment and finances for the old model, but the stated commitment was absolutely focused on employee well-being and ensuring care continues smoothly.
So what's the goal with the new model?
The aim is to provide comparable services, preventative care, wellness, mental health support, keeping the same $10 copay for employees on certain plans. The hope is that partnering with a bigger community provider might actually lead to broader access and maybe even more services down the line. The board really dug into the details, ensuring a smooth transition and clear communication.
Okay, adapting services, but keeping the focus on supporting employees. And then looking at SISD's own promotional stuff, their videos and things, they really showcase a lot of programs and successes, painting a very positive picture.
Oh, definitely. They highlight just the sheer breadth of opportunities for students. You see mentions of, like, 45 different career and technical education pathways.
I was 5. Wow.
Yeah, plus 7 specialized academies, 7 early college high schools, all geared towards prepping kids for careers in college. They spotlight their dual language program too, the different models, the benefits, how high schoolers can earn college credit through it. And specific programs get shout outs, like the Libertas Academy for Law getting a big grant now in its 9th year.
And they seem really focused on connecting kids to what comes after high school, too.
Totally. They show off events like CareerCon XXL, a big college career in Job Expo, even a Project Search reverse job fair where students showcase skills to employers. There's this underlying theme of helping students maybe earn college credits or skills early on so they potentially don't have to work quite as much while they're actually in college later.
Setting them up for success long term. What about recognizing the people involved, the staff, and students making things happen?
Yeah, the sources show that too. They highlight finalists for Teacher and Support Employee of the Year, an administrator getting a regional award, students winning significant UTEP scholarships. It puts faces to the achievements.
And some cool, engaging activities were featured, too, weren't they?
For sure. We saw things like the Girls Flag Football Championship. That was a cool partnership with the Dallas Cowboys and Houston Texans. There was an academic technology showcase where kids demonstrated their tech skills, and even a Black History Month art contest. It paints a picture of a dynamic environment.
And kind of woven through all this messaging, there's this sense of, like, the district's culture they're trying to promote.
Yes, very much so. There's this consistent message that even though SISD is huge, over 48,000 students, they want it to feel like a place where people are cared for, where they belong. That whole all-in slogan seems to reinforce that idea of unity and shared commitment.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got these major state funding increases from HB2. We have SISD's plan to implement them, boosting pay. We see their proposals for extra stipends for specific high-need roles, responding to feedback. We see efforts to retain staff, adapt services like the Clinic for Wellbeing, and then all these diverse programs and student successes being showcased. What does this whole picture tell you about where SISD is right now?
I think it tells you SISD is actively navigating a really dynamic environment. They're putting state law into action. Those HB2 mandates mean real money, significant base pay increases for many employees, especially those veteran teachers.
Right.
But at the same time, they're not just doing the minimum required. They're proposing these additional local adjustments, like the BIC stipend increase or the elementary class size stipend, based on what they're hearing from staff and seeing as critical needs. And all this is happening alongside this continued focus on broader things, supporting staff wellness, keeping good teachers, offering a huge range of programs for kids, and really trying to cultivate that positive community feel.
So it shows a district that's responding to state policy, yes, but also trying to proactively address its own local context and highlighting the positive things already happening. It's easy to just see headlines, but looking at these sources together gives you, the listener, a much richer sense of the concrete steps being taken to improve things for employees and offer strong programs for students right now.
Exactly. It really reveals those multiple layers, the state mandates, the local responses, the ongoing initiatives all happening at once in a big district.
So, thinking about everything we've unpacked here, the state law driving pay changes, the district's plan to enact that, plus add its own targeted support, the vital employee feedback highlighting needs that maybe aren't fully covered yet, and all the other efforts around programs and well-being. It leaves us with a pretty interesting question for you to chew on.
Yeah, how do large school districts like SISD really navigate that constant balancing act? You've got these required actions from the state, like HB2's pay hikes. Then you have local discretion deciding on additional stipends, figuring out the best way to run a health clinic. How do they meet the mandates, respond effectively to the specific local needs their own employees are voicing, and maintain financial health for the whole system, all while trying to achieve excellence and support everyone? It's definitely a complex picture, and hopefully digging into these sources helps you see all those moving parts a bit more clearly.